Okay, 1 minute, we'll get started. Okay. All right, we have a bunch of people signed on, so we're going to get started. I like to start on time. So everybody who's here, thank you for being here on time. I'm sure we'll have a few more people signing on in the next few minutes. But for those of you who are here already, thank you and welcome. Tonight's topic is getting macronutrients at your summer barbecue. So we're going to be talking about what the macronutrients are. I think we'll touch a little bit about, what micronutrients are, and what's the best way to make sure we're getting the best sources of macronutrients at our summer barbecues, or really any meal. I just threw in the summer barbecue just because they kind of fit the theme of summer. Again, thank you for being here. For those of you who have been to past webinars, we definitely have a few new registrants who are with us tonight. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you could check out our website at fairmeals.org and see any of our past webinars and sign up for any future ones that come up as well. So I will begin tonight just by talking about, what we're going to be talking about tonight. So first, we're going to introduce myself, Fair Meals, as well as tonight's moderator, Katie Love. And then Katie's going to, talk a little bit about, a little bit more about herself, and then introduce us to our topics of macronutrients. So what are the roles of carbs, fats, and proteins in our diet? Then we're going to transition to micronutrients. We're going to talk a little bit about micronutrients, the role of vitamins and minerals in our diet. The micronutrients is actually a very, very complex topic and can get very much involved in biochemistry. So I want to definitely keep it top level, and I will do that. So we'll talk, we'll again keep top level, talk about the micronutrients. And then as always, the application, and we'll bring in a recipe, which is always what I like to do at the end of these webinars. So introduction. So about Fair Meals. So we are a free online platform offering families healthy, simple, and affordable meal solutions. So we are a 501c3 status nonprofit. With this free online platform, we have recipes online. We have nutrition programming focusing on nutrition education, group counseling sessions. Our mission is to empower families with nutrition education, step-by-step recipes, and budget planning to make meals healthy, easy, and affordable. And our vision is to really combat America's chronic disease crisis by making healthy food an option for every family. I heard a really, really crazy, interesting statistic. It's actually pretty sad, but I was speaking to one of the organizations that we're partnering with. I was speaking with them, and they mentioned that in one of the school districts that they work with, they have 60% of the kids in that school district are obese or overweight, which is an astonishingly high statistic. So, a lot of that, of course, genetics definitely plays into it, but a big, big role is obviously diet and physical activity, and just letting people know that healthy food is an option for everybody can really help with that. So that's, a big part of our vision. So about me, so I founded Fair Meals, again, to offer nutritional guidance and easy recipes to really help empower families to eat well on a budget. I'm a registered dietitian. I have my master's of science, in nutrition and dietetics from NYU. I'm also a mom to 2 young boys, a mom, a wife. And I definitely know how difficult it can be to provide healthy meals for my family, but that are also convenient and don't take a long time to make, and of course, affordable. So with this resource, I really hope to help families from all walks of life. And about our moderator for tonight, so Katie Love, she graduated from Texas Texas Christian University with a degree in broadcast journalism. After covering natural disasters, murder cases, and presidential elections, she took a strategic leap when she jumped headfirst into launching her social media agency called Social Media. Having built her own personal brand and following, Katie repurposed that savvy to fuel her true passion of working with her all-female team on transforming and elevating other women-funded businesses. She's not shy about owning her strong feminine powers and believes every woman can and should step into hers, all the while wearing a whole lot of tulle and pink. I totally agree with that. Pink is definitely my favorite color too. She was raised in Miami, Florida, where she currently lives with her husband, who is a stay-at-home dad to their toddler-age daughter. So Katie's also really awesome at making reels. If you guys saw our reel, she put that together. She's really good at it, and her reels on Instagram are awesome. So definitely check that out. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Katie.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm the owner of Love Social Media. I think personally, I'm so interested in food now that I'm thinking about it for my daughter. And I think about meal planning and food like the triangle pyramid that we learned when we were young. And I'm really excited to hear more about macronutrients because it's not something I think I ever would have thought about for what I'm eating or even what my daughter is eating, which is so important. And I think that this topic of food and what we're putting into our bodies is just so important. And I'm really excited to be here. With that, I know we're talking about macronutrients first. So can you tell us a little bit? I think some of us would even need just the definition because
Yes.
I'm not exactly sure what it means.
Yes, I definitely will. And actually, before we start, I just want to mention to everybody, especially for those who are new here, please feel free to put your questions into the chat box. Katie will be monitoring that chat box as the presentation as we're going along, and will ask questions during the presentation. We find it's been really engaging and helpful and really just elevates, I guess, the level of conversation. So definitely feel free to bring in those questions as we're going through the night. So back to your question of macronutrients, I really agree with you. I think I put this topic out there and so many people are like, oh, wow, like what are macronutrients? What are micronutrients? And actually, you know exactly what they are because you eat them every single day, right? So the macronutrients are, just think the nutrients, right? We know that word. So macro are those big nutrients that we're eating, right? That our body needs. So there's three macros. So we have carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So we're going to be talking about, what the role of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins are, what we should be focusing on when in looking in, more specifically, what types of carbs do we want, what types of fats do we want, and what types of proteins do we want. And then at the end, when we go through, that application process of how to kind of, create the ideal the ideal plate at our summer barbecues, what we should be looking for in these macronutrients. So that's going to be the first thing. And then there was micronutrients, or the smaller nutrients. So those are going to be our vitamins and minerals. So we have the fat soluble vitamins, which are the A, D, E, and K. And then we have the water solubles, which are, the rest of all of the B vitamins and the C vitamins, vitamin C, and the rest of that. And then the minerals and the trace minerals, and those are going to be like selenium and iron and all those other things. So there's actually a lot, as I mentioned, there's a lot of biochemistry behind micronutrients, and obviously we're not going to go so into that. But macro, micro, we may hear the words and be like, oh, macros must be more important, but actually they're both equally important. There's just, they play different roles. And the macros play, a little bit of a bigger role in the day-to-days, but we definitely need those micronutrients as well. And that's really what we're going to go through tonight. So I'm going to kind of dive in here. So macronutrients are the nutrients that your body needs in large amounts. And that's why, again, they're these macros. These are the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the fats. So they contain the components of food that your body needs to maintain its systems and structures. So they're going to be really important for our organ systems. They're going to be especially, our brain, providing, energy to our bodies. So they're really for the big stuff. They can, So you need all three macronutrients as part of a healthy diet. So you shouldn't exclude or seriously restrict any of them. So foods may not exclusively belong to one macronutrient character. Some of them will overlap, and you'll notice that, and you'll see that here. I think this is a really good diagram to show that some of them do actually overlap, right? So for example, something like we see these peas here. So peas have some protein in them, and they also have some carbohydrates in them. So I think that's like always a good example. And you see some other foods, that have fats and also have proteins, cheese, salmon, right? We have those good omega-3 fatty acids in salmon, but it's also a really good protein. So those are just some examples of things that overlap. But I think what's really important, here to know is that we hear, of people all the time saying, oh, well, I cut carbs out of my diet and I cut fats out of my diet. And you probably really didn't cut carbs and fats out of your diet. And if you did, you're doing something really wrong, because yes, you may cut simple carbohydrates out of your diet, right? Like white bread and cookies and cake and candies. All of that is simple carbohydrates. And, in moderation, that's all okay. But do we want to be eating that, every single day? No. So those are simple carbohydrates that we're going to be taking out of our diet. But things like complex carbohydrates that contain protein and other really good nutrients, we need those in our diet. We need those carbohydrates to help fuel our brain, to help fuel our bodies. So things like fruit, right? Fruits are carbohydrates. Yogurt has carbohydrates. If you look at a yogurt, you'll see, sugar, you'll see carbohydrates, and you'll see sugar. You'll see carbohydrates, and you'll see that, there's like a significant amount of carbohydrates in there, but it's all really natural carbohydrates. Those are complex carbohydrates. Those are good carbohydrates. We want that. Same thing, you'll see sugar. That's why I mentioned sugar. You'll see like 10 grams of sugar, and that might freak people out, but that's really natural sugar. On most new nutrition labels, we'll see added sugars. And that's a new thing that they added probably in, I think it was 2000, either 2016 or 2018, that they added that. And that's been really helpful, so that people know, am I having natural occurring sugar, because lactose is a natural occurring sugar, or is there added sugar? And it's definitely helped people differentiate between the two. So again, we definitely don't want to take carbs out of our diet. We don't want to take fats out of our diet. We want to make sure we're eating the right amounts, and we'll go through that tonight as well.
I think that's so interesting, because when we think about, I need to get healthier, I want to feel better, a lot of it is the rhetoric of restriction. What can we take away? Not eat. And
exactly.
I love what you're saying about that not really being the case. We don't need to restrict ourselves from no carbs. It's always an extreme, I feel like, when we're these diets. So what would you say, if we're thinking about a pie chart, the percentage of carbs to proteins to fat? Is there a difference, or is it all an equal balance?
Actually, carbs should be a pretty big amount of our diet. And I don't really believe in the percentages, just because everybody's really different. So for example, somebody that's an athlete, right? They're going to need a lot of carbs. They'll probably need somebody that works out, very often, and for a few hours a day. They'll need more carbohydrates than somebody who's a little bit more sedentary. So I don't like to give like the pie chart and percentages, just because it's such an individualized amount. But I think it's important to know your body and know, and sometimes when it's important to be in tune with your body. And I think when you become in tune with your body, you are more likely to kind of understand the types of foods, and how you feel. And, if you are working out a lot, what types of food should you be eating before you work out and after you work out, and what should be the composition of, proteins, fats, and carbs be. And I think people start to learn that, but I think it's important, really, this is really just important for people to know that we do need all three of them. And saying, oh, I'm cutting carbs out is a really bold statement. It's a really, really bad thing to say. And, for lack of a better word, it's a bad thing to say, because we shouldn't be, taking carbs out. And if you're probably not actually taking carbs out, you're probably taking, white bread out, which is fine. But it's important to know, I guess, the language around that as well. I think we have a few questions that came in, but I don't know if they have to do with if we want to read those now.
Well, Debbie said was very good information, which I could not agree more on. I think that I've heard a lot about no carb dieting. And my question would be, what would the ramifications be? Why do we need carbs? What does it do for our body? How does it help us?
So carbs are important because they're, and I think we go through this a little bit more after too, but carbs are important. They provide our brain with energy. They provide our body with energy. Our body would literally run out of fuel if we did not have carbohydrates. And there's a whole, the keto diet is about, our body going into ketosis and using protein as that energy, but that can be a really, really dangerous thing. And I'm honestly not an expert on it, so I'm not even going to go into it. But that's something that people really need to be very, very smart about and need to read up a lot about if that's something that they want to do, because it can be very, very dangerous, and our body can actually go into something that's called ketoacidosis, which is very dangerous, and can cause a whole detrimental amount, a whole amount of things that are very detrimental to our health. So it's very important to, to make sure that we're doing that properly. But I would say just stick with the carbohydrates and let's not make things more complicated.
You don't have to eat twice to stick with carbs, okay?
Exactly. So here's, I guess, to answer your question more. So carbs are the primary fuel for our central nervous system. So our brain, our kidneys, our heart muscles. So really important organs, right? So fiber is an important component of carbohydrates. So you'll see, on a nutrition label, you'll see carbohydrates, and then under that, there's that subcategory of fiber. So it's actually, it's a component of carbohydrates. So it aids in digestion, it promotes bowel health, and it keeps you fuller for longer. So very, plays a very important role. At Fair Meals, I'm a huge proponent of fiber, and fiber and protein together, especially, but really making sure that we're getting foods that are high in fiber. It's going to be very important. Most people actually, I forgot what the statistic is, but most people don't eat enough fiber per day, and people still may, be going to the bathroom every day and feel good and okay, but we really should be, our goal should be to be getting, even if we're not going to be getting to that exact number, our goal should be every day we want to make sure we're getting, more and more fiber in our diet. So in addition to the body system, carbs fuels your body during high intensity exercise. So as I mentioned, people who are doing a lot of exercise and are working out a lot definitely need higher exercise. You probably have heard the term carb loading, especially before, any sort of like marathon or triathlon. They have, a lot of the times they'll actually have an event, which is like this carb loading event, because they really need just like a ton of carbohydrates. So around 45 to 65 of our percent of our calories should come from healthy sources of carbohydrates. And again, I'm giving these percentages like you see 45 to 65. And again, because I don't really like to give a specific number because everybody's really different, but this is a pretty significant amount of our diet that should be coming from carbohydrates.
And I think that Debbie had a question too of how much is the right amount to eat each day. I think this might be referring to the macronutrients, but what I hear you saying is not to get too into the percentages but I think, what would the guidance be? Are we trying to have carbs at every meal? Is it twice?
Definitely we want carbs every meal. I'm going to say if you're going to leave carbs out of something, it can be a snack. But we want carbs at every meal. We definitely want carbs at every meal. So, we don't want to say like, okay, my breakfast will be 100% carbohydrates, but that means lunch and dinner won't be. We want to split it out kind of like throughout the day. We want to make sure we're getting pretty even amount of carbohydrates. Our snack, that's what can be, the fat and the protein. And, having a carbohydrate here and there is also fine, especially if you're going to have a fruit or something like that. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But definitely we want carbohydrates in all of our meals. Yes.
And I think that when we think of carbs, I am automatically thinking of
bread.
And so what are some of the
totally
that we might not be thinking of that have carbs?
So that brings me to the next slide. So what are some healthier sources, right? So we focus on eating high fiber carbohydrates like whole grains, fruits, and a variety of vegetables, right? So we have fruits like apples, bananas. I know some people are like, oh, I can't eat bananas. They're very high in carbohydrates and high in sugar, but there's a lot of really great nutrients there, like potassium, that, we need potassium in our diet. And it's, really important to make sure that we're getting that. And bananas are a very, very high source of that. Blueberries, peaches, plums. So then there's non-starchy vegetables, which are, don't have carbohydrates, but then we do have starchy vegetables, which have, beans, lentils, sweet potatoes, squash. And then we have whole grains like brown rice, millet, oats, so like oatmeal, quinoa. These are all really great sources of healthy sources of carbohydrates. So again, what should we be eating in moderation? Processed refined grains, so like breakfast cereals, white bread, white flour, processed refined sugar, so cane sugar, brown sugar, corn syrup. These are things, again, we don't need to eliminate them from our diet, but we should be eating them in moderation. My go-to, like for breakfast cereals, is a good example. When people ask me if I work, if I've ever worked with people, one-on-one, or if I'm in a group counseling session, I'll usually tell people my rule of thumb is to try to find a breakfast cereal that has 5 grams or less of sugar. And that's usually a pretty good, healthy breakfast cereal option. So that's usually what I'll tell people.
So you're not saying to eliminate cereal completely, which I have to tell you, when my husband and I started dating, and every night he would have like Fruity Pebbles.
Yeah.
And
they are delicious, so I get it.
Oh, good, but it's like a dessert. It's like a dessert.
Yes. But there are definitely good breakfast cereals, breakfast cereal options. So I don't want to tell people don't have them. And also sometimes, you need to get your kids out really quickly and you want them to eat something, and you're just going to give them whatever it is. You're going to give them a breakfast cereal, and that's fine. But there are healthier options. And, typically, like I said, the rule of thumb would be, 5 grams of sugar or less. And those are great options. And that's what we should be keeping at home. If you want to have, on the weekends, you can have your sugary breakfast cereal. That's fine. That's okay. And, I'm all for that. We shouldn't restrict our kids also. And that's, something I really want to talk about here as well, because I think restricting your kids can actually sometimes cause an unhealthy relationship with food as they get older, because kids really tend to just know what they want. And most of the time it's going to be these unhealthy foods, and we should never say that they can never have them. There's a time and a place for them. And I think it's important to teach them that from a young age.
What do you think about juice? Because when I was growing up, my mom definitely restricted all orange juice, and I feel like I have a complicated relationship with it now. And even when my daughter, sometimes she'll see other kids have apple juice or orange juice, and I know it has sugar, but what would your feedback be on
So
juice?
listen, it definitely has sugar, and it should not be a primary beverage. I think, water, milk obviously is good. Water and milk. Water should really be a primary beverage. Milk can be 1 or 2 times a day if they're still interested in milk. My 3.5-year-old is definitely still interested in milk, so he has it twice a day. But primarily he has water. But again, on weekends, I'll give him some orange juice. I'll give him, so he loves grape juice. We do like Shabbat dinner, and he'll have and lunch. He'll have some grape juice here and there. I will definitely not say to restrict it completely, but it should not be a primary. When I see kids walking around with bottles of juice, that's the problem, because you're seeing them just like in the park with juice, and they should really be having water. It should be their primary beverage. It should not be juice. But here and there as a treat, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And that is my opinion. And probably most dietitians would tell you the same thing. And if they don't, then just look for someone else.
Well, I'd love to talk about protein too.
Yeah.
That's another thing that I'm struggling to get my daughter to eat, is some protein.
Proteins are really hard with kids. They really, really are. And I think a lot of it is a texture thing. I think proteins vary tremendously in their textures. And I think that's why it's so difficult for kids, because I think like fruits and vegetables, sometimes, I know kids sometimes have issues with that too. But I think a lot of fruits, like they have the crunchy, crispy kind of texture, and they kind of feel similar. And I think proteins are just everything is so different in texture, that I think it's like a real reason why so many kids have issues with protein. And they also have, a lot of them have stronger tastes. So I'll talk to you about why they're necessary. So they're necessary for the growth of muscles and cells, and they allow chemical reactions to occur, transport and store nutrients, provide structure, and help fight infection. So basically, proteins play many important roles in our body, and they really do. So the amount of protein you need, again, will depend, like I said, with carbohydrates, it will depend on your weight and your level of physical activity. So around 10 to 35% of our calories should come from healthy sources of protein. And again, I know that these percentages vary again, but it's really because it really is dependent on the person. Again, also somebody, people have different disease states. Somebody who has kidney disease needs a lot less protein because their kidneys can't handle so much protein. So it really depends on the person. Again, in a clinical setting, they'll usually, it really depends on what the reason, the primary reason for them being there is, but they have to look at the whole picture. And somebody, again, who does have kidney issues, they'll put them on a lower level. Somebody who, has bed sores, they'll put them on a higher level of protein, because protein is going to be very helpful in making sure that those bed sores get, resolved and they cure. So, protein's one of those things that, again, they vary from person to person. So what are some types of proteins that we want to incorporate? We want to try to incorporate lean animal proteins and plant-based proteins into our diet. So animal-based would be things like poultry, seafood, eggs, yogurt, and then plant-based, tofu, tempeh, edamame, so soybeans, lentils, beans, hemp seeds. Quinoa is a really good protein. Quinoa is one of those examples that are also a carbohydrate and also protein. And then there's things obviously that we're going to eat in moderation, and that's fine, right? Hot dogs, cold cuts, Beyond Meat, red meat, so beef, pork, lamb, veal, venison, right? We don't need to have that like 2 times a day. You can definitely, I'm not saying don't eat red meat, but make sure it's not something that we're eating, large quantities of every single day. Dairy, cheese, whole milk, butter, cream cheese, sour cream, heavy milk. I'm actually going to take whole milk and cheese out of the eat in moderation, because I think those are actually have been controversial, but I'm actually a very big proponent of whole milk, and I think it's a healthy fat, and we'll talk about fat soon. So I want to take cheese and whole milk out of that, out of the eat in moderation, because I think whole milk is totally okay to have in our diet every day, as is cheese. Obviously, we want to find the least processed cheese, right? Like American cheese is a little bit more processed than a more natural cheese. So maybe we don't need to have American cheese every day, but a less processed cheese is definitely something that we can have in our diet daily. And then a high mercury fish, we want to make sure we're not consuming too much of, because obviously mercury poisoning is something that is definitely a threat. And we want to avoid that at all costs.
Really interested to hear you say to the whole milk, because I feel like I'm so trained to have skim milk, 2%. So you're saying that it can be incorporated into the diet.
100%. And that's, there's so much research that's like back and forth when it comes to dairy, specifically whole milk dairy, but so much of the research now is in support of whole milk. And saying that, it's a healthy fat and it's good, and it's, it's helpful for, different hormones in our bodies and things of that sort. So most of the current research is actually very supportive of it. And it's something that I'm a huge proponent of, and definitely think should be part of an everyday diet. Again, if it's somebody who is really trying to lose weight, then whole milk may not be the best option for them. And, going to a 2% or a skim milk, it will probably be better just in terms of the calories, but it also depends on how much of the whole milk you're having, right? If you're putting a splash in your coffee, that's not changing anything. But if you're going to have an entire glass 2 or 3 times a day, then we probably want to have a little bit, a lower percentage of fat in our milk.
So I'm really interested in the fats too, and the percent that should be in your diet.
Yeah. So fats are interesting too, because I think fats kind of get this bad rep with carbs. When people say, oh, I'm taking all carbs out of my diet, I'm taking all fats out of my diet, but we really need fat in our diet. Like we need carbohydrates, we also really need fat in our diet. So fats are a source of energy that insulate our body and protect our organs. They're really important for our organs. They make up cell walls and aid in the absorption of fat soluble vitamins. And we want to make sure that we have fat in our diet to make sure that these fat soluble vitamins will be absorbed. And there's a lot of people who, people with eating disorders or things of that sort, who are very, very cognizant to not have a lot of fat intake. They'll, get their blood levels checked, and they will be pretty deficient in a lot of the fat soluble vitamins. And it's because they don't have enough fat in their diet. So it's really important. We don't want to be deficient in those vitamins. So it's important. We want to make sure that we're getting enough fat in our diet to help absorb these vitamins. So they're incredibly important, should not be feared or limited, right? But obviously we're going to look what are the healthier sources of them. But the daily needs, so fats are used to fuel like low intensity exercise, like walking, and you should try to get about 20 to 35% of your total daily calories from fat, right? So again, the most amount is going to be from carbohydrates, which I think shocks people a lot. The least amount is going to be really from protein, and like the medium amount is from fats. And I would say fats and proteins are kind of similar. And I think people get pretty shocked by these percentages. I know I did the first time I learned about them in one of my classes when I went back to school to study nutrition. I was like so shocked by it because of the bad rep that carbohydrates have. But you just learn, the more you learn in depth about carbohydrates and how important they are in our diets, the more it just makes sense. So, sorry if you have questions.
No, because I feel the same way about the bad rep, and that I think that this is it's like a revelation to hear that carbs and fats should be incorporated more. And the one thing I know that a lot of families who are busy jump to is the frozen meals. So I'm curious to hear too from you of like how we avoid frozen meals, which are so quick and easy to shift, and other ways that we can incorporate like healthier sources for fat.
Yeah, so I think that's a really great question. So I think the first thing is to like really educate yourself and just know like what are these healthier sources of fat, right? And then the next thing would be to meal prep, and meal prep can look really different for different people, right? So some people, meal prep can be meaning to like on Sunday literally cook your most of the meals for the week, put them in the freezer and in the fridge and the freezer, and everything's done. Say you pop it out of the fridge, pop it out of the freezer, heat it up, and that's it. Meal prep can also look like chopping up vegetables, right? Fruits and vegetables, washing them, chopping them up, keeping them in your fridge, making dips, or making dips that are good, that have good sources of fat. Let's say, right, like an avocado-based dip or a hummus, like a chickpea-based dip. These all have healthy fats. So like making sure we have things like that in our refrigerator, that can also, meal prep can also include making, shopping lists and making sure we're having these things at home, because obviously, having these frozen dinners are easy, but if we put a little bit more thought ahead of time, especially in the beginning of the week, we don't need to resort to those frozen meals. We'll have things, readily available in our houses, or, ingredients really readily available, and they'll be much easier and simpler to make, to make these meals. And they don't have to be lavish meals, right? You can have a salad, with some avocado and some other greens and cucumbers and peppers or whatever it is, and throw a piece of protein on there. And that's like also a meal. So they don't have to be so lavish. They don't have to take a long time. Even our snacks, right? So we're going to go through these healthier sources of fats, but like nuts are a great source of fat. And they're so easy. They're shelf stable. They last even longer in the freezer. And they're just really easy things. So I think if we educate ourselves and we meal prep and we, make grocery lists and we make sure we have these things at home, we won't have to go to these frozen meals and these unhealthier options.
And that's so interesting, because last week, and now that it's not a choking hazard, I allowed my daughter to have some, and I wasn't sure what she was going to think. And she loved them. It was such like a great snack for her, and I was so surprised.
Yeah. Same here, by the way. My son had pistachios for the first time, and I was like so shocked that he loves them, and he asked for pistachios all the time. And we were actually at a friend's house and she had all these like amazing snacks. And he was like, I want pistachios. And like, she was like, whoa, you did something right. And I'm like, but it's good. You expose it. Obviously they are a choking hazard up to a certain age. So it's important, for you to be familiar with that, for everybody here to be familiar with that. But once they do get past that age, it's important to expose expose your kids to that. And obviously, they can't take those to school, but even at home, when they come home from school, setting out for them these healthier snacks so that they don't go to the cabinets and take out the chips and the cookies and whatever it is that you have in there, because it's okay to have those snacks there. But if you're setting them out and you make it enticing for them to make it enticing for them to grab from your kitchen or your kitchen table, then it will definitely you'll expose them, and they'll probably surprise you and they'll like them a lot.
I was pleasantly surprised. I will try pistachios next. But next we're talking about micronutrients. So we talked all about macro and what we need. And now I'm just excited to hear about micronutrients, what's in them, what we should be eating.
Okay, so now we're going to get to micronutrients. So the role of vitamins and minerals in our diet. And I just keep seeing, I don't know, Katie, if you can there's a question I see on the Q&A box, something's popping up, but I can't seem to open it. I don't know if you can.
Yes, I see.
Oh, okay, got it.
Since there are so many types of carbs, should we try our best to eliminate all simple carbs like white breads and cake?
So again, that doesn't have to be part of our diet every day. But again, on weekends, if you want to, have a cookie or a piece of cake, or if you go out for dinner and you want to have some dessert, there's no problem with that. But like on your day-to-day, for your day-to-day meals, yes, it's better probably to have, a complex carbohydrate. But like, even for me, I'm guilty of this myself, and I'm actually really okay with sharing this. I really dislike whole wheat pasta. And if I'm going to have pasta, I would rather have white pasta. So what I'll do to kind of counter using that whole wheat pasta, to kind of counter it, is I'll usually try to add some other, good nutrients into that pasta, right? So I'll usually try to load it with some vegetables, right? With like zucchini and onions and mushrooms and peppers and whatever it is. So I'm adding some more fiber in there, and I'm making it more nutrient dense. So that's, one thing that I like to do. Because I prefer to have the white pasta over the whole wheat pasta, but what is something I can do to make it healthier? So that's, a trick or a tip rather, that I can share with you that I personally do myself.
I'm all about white pasta as well, so thank you.
Same, yes. So, okay, so micronutrients. So what are the roles of micronutrients in our diet? So these are the nutrients that your body needs in smaller amounts, right? So we don't need as much as we need the macronutrients, and include vitamins and minerals. And they also include the trace minerals, but we're not really going to go into that because that's like a whole complicated thing. But vitamins are involved in energy production, immune function, blood clotting, and other chemical reactions in the body, right? So the things that they're not as involved in these big organs that we spoke about with the macronutrients, but there's the smaller things that go in our body that we have no idea go on, that the micronutrients are really important for. Their minerals are needed for bone health, water and electrolyte balance, and growth. So we have vitamins. So we have water soluble and fat soluble, which I mentioned before. And then we have the minerals, right? We have the major minerals and the trace minerals, which I've mentioned as well before. So what are the water soluble vitamins? So we have vitamin C. So what is their role? So the role is in immune health. And, obviously when most people think of vitamin C, they're going to think of a citrus fruit. There's obviously other sources, but citrus fruits are really a great source of vitamin C. Then we have vitamin B1, and the role is metabolic health. And a good source of that are sunflower seeds and other seeds as well, but sunflower seeds is the one that usually comes to mind for me. Vitamin B2, also important in metabolic health. And good sources of that are going to be animal protein. And then vitamin B3, again, important in metabolic health, and a good source of that are bananas. So vitamin B2 is one of those, just because it really is primarily found in animal protein. And again, we can find it in some non-animal sources, but people who have been vegan for many, 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 many years, and don't really get good animal protein can sometimes be deficient in B2, but it takes a very, very long time for this to happen. So sometimes they do need to go and get supplements. Sometimes they need to get an injection of vitamin B2. But this is something that they usually only worry about after many, many years, because it does take a pretty long time for that to happen.
I have to be honest, I never heard of water soluble vitamins. I just heard of vitamins. So, and I mean, it makes sense when I'm looking at individual ones. But I think some of these, like folate, I haven't heard much about. B12, B6, I feel is a lot more common.
Yeah.
And then how we're getting these versus trying to take supplements. Like,
yes. And that's right. Yes. And like, yes, an easy thing to do is to take the supplements, but obviously I'm here to like, I guess, educate and let everyone know that like food sources do contain these vitamins and these minerals, and and if we can get them through food, then that's great. And sometimes people need an extra boost through supplements and vitamins and supplements. So yes, that's okay if you need that, but why not try to, like, food is medicine, or food is, not all of the time. Sometimes we do need medicines, but food essentially is medicine and can help, restore nutrients that we may be deficient in. So it's important to know that, and it's important to know what are the sources of these foods that we can, that can help replenish these vitamins and minerals in our blood. So so there's a lot of water soluble vitamins. So I'm going to go through the rest of these, and then we'll go to the fat solubles as well. But the role B12, so is blood health. Again, a lot of animal protein, and again, we see the same thing with the people anybody who does follow a vegan diet for many, many years. Sometimes we see this B12 deficiency as well. Vitamin B6. Again, blood health. A lot of the vitamins are metabolic and blood health. You'll see a bit of a pattern there with that. A great source of vitamin B6 are chickpeas. I always think about that. I always tell people, when you're eating chickpeas, really, really great source of B6. Biotin, you've probably heard about this a lot, as it contains to skin and nails, very important for skin and hair and nails health. And a great source of that is avocado. Pantothenic acid, so again, blood health, great source of that are oats. And folate. Folate is going to be really important for those of you who have ever been pregnant or have met with an OBGYN. Probably know, if you're planning on getting pregnant, know folate and folic acid are very, very important for pregnancy and for preventing neural tube defects. So it's important for blood health, but it's also important for our fetus and our developing fetus. And a great source of that are eggs. And a lot of times during pregnancy, additional folic acid is necessary as well.
How quickly I forget. It's only been 2 years, but I remember folic acid being so important in your diet when I was pregnant. And I don't think about it as much now, but obviously I should.
Everyone definitely needs it. I think just during pregnancy, most people definitely need a little bit of an extra boost. And I think a lot of it is also a lot of the foods that do contain folate or folic acid. So a lot of people can't really stomach those foods in the first trimester, which is actually when folate is the most important in that first trimester, because that's when we want to, that's when that neural tube will close by the end of that first trimester. So I think that's also a big reason why, folate's important, especially during pregnancy. So, but yes, people forget very often, but otherwise folate is definitely an important, is an important vitamin to make sure that we have, no matter whether we're pregnant or not, during pregnancy or not. So now we're going to go to the fat soluble vitamins. So we have vitamin D, A, E, and K. So vitamin D is very important for bone health. So sources are sunlight, but that's obviously we don't always get enough from sunlight. So other good sources are the yolk of the egg is a very good source of vitamin D as well. It's pretty normal to be deficient in vitamin D. So a lot of the times someone's doctor will probably recommend, a primary care doctor would recommend that they take a supplement in vitamin D. But if somebody is eating eggs daily, they probably should be good with vitamin D. And there's other foods as well that contain vitamin D, including fish. If somebody has, plenty of fish in their diet, they'll also probably get enough vitamin D from that as well, specifically salmon. Vitamin A, an important role in eye health. Sources include oranges, also carrots. Those are all great sources of vitamin A. Vitamin E plays an important role in our skin health. Nuts and seeds contain great amounts of vitamin E. And then the last one is vitamin K, and that's important in blood health and clotting. So good sources of that are dark leafy greens, and you might even, for anybody who has had a newborn, they do usually give vitamin K shots in the hospital in their foot, and that is to make sure that they're not really born with vitamin K. They need like that initial boost to make sure that they do have the ability for their blood to clot. And then, that's good for a pretty long time for them. And then, as they start eating, as they start their diets and eating, we want to make sure that they're getting good sources through food as well. And dark leafy greens are definitely going to be the best sources of vitamin K.
So now that you have shared all this knowledge with us, I think it's important to find out about the application and how we can put it to good use.
Yeah, definitely. So the application is the most important part, right? Because we can have all of this information, but how does this apply to us? So definitely going to be important. So, as I mentioned, we're going to apply this to making your summer barbecue, right? We want to make sure that we're going to, so, this is obviously helpful whether you're making your own barbecue, you're hosting, or if you're at somebody's house, how should our plate look, right? And again, this can really be for any meal that we're eating at home, any meal we're hosting, any meal that we're eating out at somebody's house. So we want to make sure it's balanced, colorful, obviously delicious, and affordable. And that's, obviously going to be important no matter what. And that's going to be important when we are hosting. We want things to be affordable. And that's definitely possible and attainable. So balanced. So we want to make sure to include all three of the macronutrients, right? We want the proteins, the fats, and the carbohydrates. We want it to be colorful to incorporate the rainbow to ensure maximum nutrients, especially fiber and those vitamins and minerals that we spoke about. Because if you saw many of those sources of the vitamins, a lot of them come from, these colorful fruits and vegetables. Delicious, right? There's no need to compromise taste when prioritizing health. Healthy food is delicious, can be delicious. And it's important to know that. And also affordable, right? We want to meal prep, like I mentioned before. A lot of the times it takes some time investment ahead of time, but it can end up saving a lot of money. Bulk batches, seasonal produce, and more. There's definitely ways to make this affordable. I think we have a question. I'm not sure. Yeah, we do.
Yes. So if you wear sunscreen, do you also get the vitamin D you would get if you do not wear sunscreen?
So it's a really good question. And there's a lot of research that kind of goes back and forth on that. Not sure what a lot of the current research says, but from when I did actually do a paper on vitamin D a few years back. And there was, kind of things that said both, but you're definitely not getting all of the benefits of the sun, but obviously the risks are very much outweighing the benefits there. So you're better off, getting it from food and from other sources than getting a horrible sunburn and, possibly worse. So, it's all like a risk reward system, and the risk of melanoma or a horrible sunburn, or God forbid melanoma or something worse, or sun poisoning or whatever it is not not worth it. And sunscreen's obviously going to be more important, but we can still get some vitamin D. We're definitely getting some, but we're not getting enough, and we're not getting all that we need just from that. So yes, so it's important to make sure we're getting from food sources as well. And some affordable practices. So meal prep, like we said, to minimize waste, save time, and conserve your energy. Choosing canned. There's a ton of things that we can do with canned, right? We can grill tuna or salmon. We can, make tuna or salmon burgers. We actually have a delicious salmon burger recipe on our website that uses canned salmon. So you can put those on the grill, right? You can make a great like vegetarian option for people as well. Add legumes and veggies to a salad, again, from cans. Use leftovers, right, for meals throughout the week, freeze for a later time or repurpose into something new, right? You have some proteins left from the barbecue, use for the next day in a salad, make a chicken salad. There's a lot of things that we can do, bulk batches. So for pasta salads, potato salads, roasted veggies, or grilled meats. Select seasonal, right? Seasonal produce is fresher, nutrient dense, and a lot of the times can be more affordable. Obviously not if you're going to like Whole Foods, but if you go to some of these like farmer markets or look for things like that, you can find things more affordable, and you can buy like, you buy two, get one free or some things like that. We spoke about that in, I think, 2 webinars ago. About how, seasonal can actually be sometimes more affordable. And shop sales, right? So plan the menu based on the sales or what coupons that you have. Again, this may be more time investment up front, but it can really help save money and can help you do this very affordably. And I always like to end off with a recipe. So we have here a caprese pasta salad. So we have whole wheat pasta or whatever pasta you want to use. Tomatoes, some mozzarella balls, basil as garnish. We're using some olive oil, some balsamic vinegar, salt and pepper. And see, we have, the whole wheat pasta. We have our carbohydrate. We have our protein, which is the cheese, and we have our fat, our healthy fat, which is the olive oil. So we're using all of these macronutrients. We have the tomatoes, which again have fiber, and they also have some really great vitamins and minerals in there. Also the basil as well. And you're really going to put this together. It's super easy. It's a great side dish for a salad. It stays for a very long time in the refrigerator after, so it can definitely stay, another 4 or 5 days. You can easily repurpose this into something else. You can, heat it up. And yeah, it's a pretty easy, good side dish salad. It's also a really great meal on its own because it incorporates all of these macronutrients and a lot of micronutrients as well. So yeah, that's that's the recipe. Oh yeah, and then I added these health highlights. So the nutrients, so the whole wheat, as I mentioned, the whole wheat pasta is a great source of fiber. The mozzarella cheese has both the protein and calcium, right? So that's one of those minerals. The tomatoes have these lycopene, which are an antioxidants. Extra virgin olive oil, that's going to be that healthy fat. And basil is going to be, also rich in micronutrients. It has tons of minerals as well, and helps support low blood pressure, which obviously is very important. So that is really it. I think that's all we have. We still have a few minutes if we have any other questions. Otherwise, that's it. Katie, anything else to add?
I think this was really informative about macro and micronutrients, especially the restriction part, because that has for so long been something that I've thought about if I'm, trying to feel healthier. Is what can I take out? What can I take out? It's just the next thing that I go to. I loved your pasta salad recipe. I know that's such a great staple for summer barbecues and quick to make, and something I'll definitely be considering. And I just appreciate you for sharing so much rich information.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us and your questions and everything. It was really, really great and informative. And I think it really made a great conversation. So thank you so much. I don't know if like a comment just came through or a question, but I saw something pop up, but really thank you so much. This was so great. And I hope everybody enjoyed, and please feel free to reach out with any questions. My email's here. Please visit our website and follow us on Instagram, and please, come to more webinars.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Bye. Okay.
The last question was just about the website.
Yeah, I answered. Yeah, I just wrote, okay, amazing. Let me end recording.